Well, let's turn next to reaction from the business world to events in Washington. And for that, I'm joined on set by our business editor, Stephen Carroll. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Haxie.
How exactly have markets been reacting to all this?
Well, markets were open and trading on Wall Street when events were starting to unfold in Washington, but investors have largely shrugged off all of these events that we've seen, these dramatic pictures coming out of the US Capitol. Instead, investors much more focused on the fact that the Democrats have taken control of the Senate and what that will mean for advancing Joe Biden's plans, particularly when it comes to the economy. The Dow Jones finished trading on Wednesday up over 1%, gains too on the S&P 500. It was the Nasdaq, which is where many of the world's biggest technology companies are listed, that dipped into the red. And that's also linked to the Senate elections, as that's investors fearing that there could be increased regulation of tech companies, the Democrat-controlled House. Now, it's worth saying that the markets were slightly higher before we saw that violence on Capitol Hill. So there was some investor reaction, but largely they're much more focused on the bigger and long-term picture of what Democrat control of the House, Senate and presidency will mean for the economy. On the Asian markets, we're seeing rallies today on many of the main markets for fairly similar reasons. The Nikkei in Tokyo up 1.6% at the close, gains in Shanghai and on the Kospi in Seoul as well. Some market analysts seeing these actions as likely to weaken Trump's grip on his supporters and thus his ability to remain a force out of office. So that's kind of where the markets are looking at now, much more looking towards the long term rather than what's been happening just in the past 24 hours.
And Stephen, what have business leaders been saying about everything we've seen in Washington on Wednesday?
Many of the biggest names in American business have been expressing their horror at the violence that we saw, this coming in a week where many corporate leaders had already been publicly calling for a peaceful transition of power in the United States. The boss of Apple, Tim Cook, on Twitter calling it a sad and shameful chapter in our nation's history. He said that those responsible for this, quote, insurrection should be held to account, adding that it's especially when they are most challenged that our ideals matter most. That's the boss of Apple. The chief executive of Visa, meanwhile, Alfred Kelly, writing to his employees about this, saying the violence is one of the lowest points in our nation's 245-year history. That statement being published on his LinkedIn page as well. The boss of the bank, JP Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon, saying in a statement that this is not who we are as a people or a country. And in a nod towards Donald Trump, he went on to say that our elected leaders have a responsibility to call for an end to the violence, accept the results and support the peaceful transition of power. Very similar messages coming from many of those big corporate leaders.
So what then about those business people who have in the past supported Donald Trump?
So Stephen Schwarzman is a good example of one of those. He's one of Trump's most loyal Wall Street allies. He's the head of the investment firm Blackstone. He tweeted, again using that word, insurrection, saying that followed the president's, the insurrection that followed the president's remarks today is appalling and an affront to the democratic values that we hold dear as Americans. He added also that there must be a peaceful transition of power. So no support from those who are loyal to Donald Trump in the business community either. I've been taking a look too at some of the trade unions and how they've been reacting to this too. If we look at the North America Building Trades Union, which represents 3 million construction workers in the United States, it's called on the president as well as Senators Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley to step down as a result of this. The union's president, Sean McGarvey, calling for a bipartisan commission to investigate and identify all planners, funders and coordinators of what he calls this attempted coup and refer them for prosecution by the US Justice Department. That's the picture there from one of the main trade unions representing the construction industry. The National Farmers Union, meanwhile, saying this event demonstrating how fragile democracy truly is.
Stephen Carroll with a look at how the business world's been reacting to events on Capitol Hill. Thank you very much.